Welcome to the Headless Giant Show. I'm going in a little bit of a different direction tonight. I've got my co-host Nick from the Occult Rejects here with me, and I'm going to be reading your occult emails. So if you'd like, I have scrolling across the bottom of the screen there the email address. You can send me your stories, whether it's esoteric, occult, magical, or paranormal experiences. I will read them on my show. So I think this is a good opportunity for more involvement. And this week, I've got an email from a guy talking about a Bosnian situation with an Islamic ghost. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Let's see. Here we go. What's this? You guys going live tonight? Yeah. I accidentally put the wrong time out there. Whatever. I'm sure they're going to figure it out. Okay. So it starts like this. Hello. Sorry if this is not terribly formal. I do not even know where to start with this or which one of the stories I would have been more interesting. The one with a Muslim ghost is somewhat funny and somewhat sad, so I'll go with that one. This happened to a cousin. He was with my uncle in some dingy bar in Bosnia, and both had gotten quite drunk, but remained reasonable enough so that they did not trust themselves with the car. The cousin chose to walk back home while the uncle decided to stay. The house he lived in was some 3 miles away upon the slope of a hill known for having a graveyard atop of it, hidden by trees that in places grew so close together that their branches blotted out the sun. They loomed over my cousin as he made his way up the hill, and concrete gave way to simple dirt road with numerous holes and sharp stones scattered about, the flashlight of his phone helping him see the way ahead. All was quiet save for the distant croaking of frogs, but eventually even they went quiet. My cousin stopped as he heard singing, distant but growing louder, Arabic, and he saw a man on the road wearing pure white robe and a headscarf, prayer beads in one hand. He sang as he walked, but his footsteps could not be heard, and his face was not there, just a patch of smooth skin. My cousin did not run. He wasn't really even terrified in that moment. He just stood there, entranced, watching as it got closer and closer, walked up to him and past him, never acknowledging his presence in any way. And once it walked past him, it was gone. In that moment, it was as if a hypnotist snapped his fingers and my cousin woke up from a trance and realized what it was he just saw. However drunk he might have been before that, he was very sober now, and he decided the sensible thing to do was to get the fuck away from there. So he ran the rest of the way home. A Muslim ghost. Crazy, but I believe it to be true. I wouldn't take it as proof that Islam is the one true faith. I suppose we all leave some kind of residue or an echo of ourselves on this earth when we pass away, some stronger than others. I did try to dig deeper into the mystery of this particular ghost, but the truth is that Bosnia is a land soaked in blood and Gothic castles. And you have to stand in for Transylvania along the dirt road where my cousin saw the ghost, where there stands now a row of a dozen ruined houses gutted by flames by the surrounding vegetation, refuses to enter remnants not just of the previous war but also of World War II, possibly even older. If some inhabitants are to be believed, I once asked an old guy passing by who it was that set the fire to all those houses. Whoever whoever could, son, he told me. I'm not sure what that means. Whoever could, son.
Oh yeah, that's probably yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Well, I'm wondering. I mean, I don't know if I would have gotten that. What I'm getting at is like I'm wondering what made him think it was a Muslim. Like that image that he had. That is interesting. That it was somebody with like the scarf on top of their head and the white robe. I mean, I have seen some occult Muslims wear that thing, but I mean, it's just interesting that he saw that image. Because I have seen that done before.
Right. Well,
I don't know if that would be a typical, if I would just assume the person's Muslim, if I saw them, whatever.
in the Islamic religion, they don't believe that you come back as a ghost, or that there's some sort of residue. What they believe is
Oh,
that there are jinn, and the jinn are the ones that you see as ghosts, and they have kind of a an appearance that they mimic human beings in their appearance, not fully,
that's why the
but
smooth face.
smooth face and the fire, right? Because jinn are fire spirits. So you've got the burnt out houses on one hand, and you've got this guy speaking or singing in Muslim or in Arabic, walking down the road, starting to add up to a little bit of a jinn situation because he's got that smooth face and also the hypnosis aspect. Jinn are supposed to be able to get inside your head and even change time around. So it was, at first I was like, it could be a ghost, but all of the things adding up, it looks a little bit like a jinn situation. And he's right about Bosnia. Bosnia used to be part of Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia was a mix of Islam, Christian, Catholic, and all these other forces that basically came together and made an agreement with the Soviet Union so they wouldn't get invaded. And so they kind of had this sort of uncomfortable truce. And it actually worked. So the dictator of Yugoslavia was pretty much loved by everybody because he was able to pound out this truce and keep everybody happy because they all knew what they were up against. So Yugoslavia was between the West and Russia. And they just said, look, we're going to go this way and you guys just leave us the fuck alone. And it worked. So they had this sort of truce period. And then, as everybody knows, in the late 90s, you had the Bosnia-Herzegovina war, and that was a big problem. So it's basically been the West that has been sort of ginning up these conflicts ever since, not to make a pun there. So yeah, I think this could have been related to the jinn because they do speak Arabic. That's a very prominent feature when it comes to stories of the jinn. And this smooth-faced jinn was probably associated with some of these fires. Like he asked, are there any fires? Who could have set these fires? And it seems like there's kind of a mystery involved there. But if that's the case, that could be the residual energy, or maybe this jinn has claimed this area for itself. But they say that the jinn are a cool fire, like it's not hot to the touch; it's actually a colder thing to the touch. And the way he described this thing, it seemed pretty cold and distant. So, kind of had that maybe emotional coldness. So, what do you think? Does that start to make sense?
Well, yeah. Look, the one thing I think I want to get at, what I was trying to get at before, is that like that's to me just automatically put like a Sufi in my head.
Right.
Seemed very specific, and it's just like, is that something that this guy even knew of, to where it was his imagination running with it? You know what I'm getting? Maybe what I'm getting at is like maybe it did look like that. Because did that to me was a very specific look. And even then, for me, anybody that I said that before because somebody said the person couldn't have been a Muslim if they were drinking, and I'm like, yeah, and Christians don't fuck before marriage too. Like, are we being serious here for real?
Right. But,
Yeah, and nobody curses either. Who's real religious? Yeah, come on. But what I was saying is that one thing I find interesting with it is that going back into the jinn, anybody that I ever came across that was kind of like, again, this just comes across from me doing research. Any Sufis I came across, they happen to be mystics, or they were occultists. So I just found it interesting that like a Sufi looking to me, Muslim, walking down the street and him having this experience, and you're going on about the jinn and the soft face. That's very weird to me,
Well, from what I know of Sufism, it's a little bit further north. It's more of like a Turkish thing. And the way he was describing this guy, it seemed like an Arabic, style guy with the scarf and everything. The Turkish Muslims look a little bit different than the
Oh yeah.
Saudi Arabian. So
Yeah, but they kind of have like a wrap thing around their head too.
Right. And so it sort of seemed like more Saudi Arabian to me. But yeah, there is this ongoing conflict in Bosnia between the Christians and the Muslims. So I don't necessarily know whether or not this was a Muslim area or a Christian area, but Christians drink, so it could be that as well. I think in a lot of conflict zones, you're going to run across a lot more of these spirits, because I think we're going to do a future episode on demons on the Occult
Yes,
Rejects.
yes, we will.
And yeah, demons really do gravitate towards conflict zones. And you'll find a lot of experiences of soldiers where they see unexplainable shit while they're out on the battlefield, because it's basically a harvest fest. I mean, a lot of people don't think that wars are related to ritualistic human sacrifice, but they absolutely are. And what's
Oh,
interesting
yeah.
too about the Bosnian conflict, America came down on the side of the Muslims in that conflict against the Christians. So in that war that Bill Clinton got us involved in, we were basically fighting on the side of the forces that would later turn into Muslim extremists all over the place. So it's kind of like we turned that place into a terrorist training ground. And so, this was setting the stage for what would later come on in, 2001 and later on. But, don't expect a lot of Americans to see that, because, America could never be fighting against people just like them. Strange that we would think that.
They have been in a lot of conflicts in the country.
Moonface Gin is a good rap name.
Yeah, you saw that, right? Yeah, but like if you want to talk about that, I mean, I guess possibly. I guess I wouldn't say every place, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of places do have. There's just been wars there anyway, but I would say Bosnia does have enough that looks like it could even be due to, I wouldn't say religious, but beliefs. You know.
Well, Bosnia is really old world. Back when it was in the ancient days, this would be sort of considered um, the Greco sort of Russian corridor. So you've got Bosnia as part of this Balkans region. I mean, this is where we get the term Balkanized from, is because it's so easy to turn these people against each other, because this is the fighting ground of the ages. Like, everybody has fought here. You're talking about Vlad Tepes in there. This is basically where Islam and the West really, really clashed for over 1,000 years. So this is a very, very hot area in terms of international conflicts and people getting in there to balkanize them. And recently, you've got America doing what you would call color revolutions, where they would go in there and fund one side so that they could overthrow the other. Balkanization and color revolutions go hand in hand. Basically, all along the Bosphorus up to the Black Sea, from around Turkey, you've got this what they call the Balto-Slavic, well, what I call the Balto-Slavic corridor, very heavily influenced by the Greeks. This is why Russian Christianity is Greek Orthodox, because as you can see with the Russian language, a lot of those characters come from the Greek. And if you know about the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, they actually went up the river there into the Black Sea, and on the far back side of the Black Sea is where they got the Golden Fleece from.
Whoa. Wow.
So that entire area has been kind of this Balto-Slavic corridor for thousands and thousands of years, and that's where you get all this Greek influence up by the Black Sea. Before that, it was the Scythians. So the Scythians really ruled all of the plain areas and the highland areas of that region, and that's where the Greeks came from. There was differing tribes of the Scythians that came in as the Pelasgians into that region of Greece, and then the Pelasgians then became the people that you see in the Iliad, right, fighting against Turkey, right, because that's where they had their big battle with the Trojan horse. The Troy was on Turkey, so you have this original conflict between East and West happening right there, right along that Bosphorus River. So it's a very, very big hotbed for conflict, always has been. And if there are jinn hanging out there to harvest the souls or whatever they're doing, that would make sense. I'm not sure if you can go back there and figure out what this jinn is doing, but that would be very interesting.
That would be nice.
So yeah, I had a couple other people tell me about their stories with telepathy. I'd love to get into that too. I couldn't find what he was talking about specifically, but I'm sure there'll be more episodes. I just
Yeah.
thought a nice little short reading of these emails and these experiences might help other people to, kind of share their experiences as well. Maybe they can find some connection there if they have some sort of family lineage going back there and they've got family relations there, or they're, reporting in from Bosnia. That'd be cool too. I think Bosnia is a really beautiful area. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of it. It's just this beautiful hilly country. And yeah, so it hasn't been completely ruined by American foreign policy yet, but I'm sure as
Not
long
yet.
as they're vassal states to the United States, it's going to happen. But basically, after the war, all of the Christian Bosnians self-segregated themselves away from the Muslims, and they haven't really been able to reintegrate back under the state yet because the Muslim state is running Bosnia. So it would make sense. I mean, there are occultists all over the place, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of black magic going on in that region.
Oh, I'm sure there's black magic going on everywhere.
And Islam has a really interesting relationship with the jinn because a lot of their magic systems go back to the idea of Solomonic magic. And so they feel like they can, control the jinn in some cases, or in other cases, they're under attack by the jinn. But I've heard a lot of stories about it, and most of it has to do with the desert. And it's really interesting that he would be wearing this desert garb that far away from the desert. And that's something that really, piques my interest, is because it seems out of place. Even the Muslims up in Bosnia, they don't dress like that. That's not very common there at all.
Oh no, that's yeah.
But
At least I think so.
the prayer beads, that's what I found interesting because the jinn are often disguised as like holy men. And so having that as the disguise would be par for the course. But I mean, on our future episode about demons, there's so much variation, but I feel like there's that gravity is what brings it together. So if there's conflict zones, high population centers, maybe an area that has had a lot of emotional intrigue and a lot of emotional outlet, those are the gravity centers that demons are really attracted to. Also, taking advantage of the graveyards and torturing the souls of the things still stuck there. And talking about the legion of demons too, because as you know from Solomonic magic, they say he's in charge of X number of legions, and it's always this huge number. How do they get those numbers?
Yeah, I was like, yo, where does this shit come from? I've even wondered, is like the numbers, like even some like the reason for that there. I don't know.
There's definitely a numerological aspect to it, so they control a certain amount of legions because that's their number. And then like 17,000 legions, well, 17 might be their number. I think it has a lot to do with the dream world as well, because there's something that I think a lot of people miss about the dream world that is very important to understanding demons, very important to understanding cosmology and everything else. We spend half our lives living in this symbolic world of the dream, right? And yet, when we wake up, it doesn't really have any impact on us because we don't see how these symbols are important. But to ancient societies, dreams were very important, and they dictated how you were to interact with the land. They dictated how you were to interact with others, and they took these dreams seriously. And it seems like the less we take our dreams seriously, the more prone to demonic influence we are, because there's something about these dreams that connect us to something greater than ourselves. And everything you do in a dream is symbolic, right? So a symbol would be a thing that is not a thing, and when you're moving around and you're talking in your dreams and you're doing all this stuff, it doesn't actually have any impact on the rest of your life in terms of real physical behavior. So it is necessarily symbolic. Everything that happens in the dream is a symbol. This is where we get our symbols from. So I think having a deeper connection to dreams gives you a deeper insight into this world of symbols, and we spend half our lives in the world of symbols. So I think it's very important to have that connection to dreams. Have you had a deep connection to dreams, or like any experiences with dreams that sort of elucidate that?
In the past, I mean, I've had some dreams where I actually question if it was out of body experiences, to tell you the truth. Um, and you know what? And the thing is too that I've noticed is that when those have happened, especially as a child, they happened a few times. It's always when I was sick,
Mm,
really sick. I would have these dreams that seemed like to the point to where it's like you'd almost feel the atmosphere around you. Like it actually felt like there was depth. It was very weird. One time, the last time it happened, probably 2000 and maybe 14 or 15. I was in fucking prison actually when it happened. It's the only reason I remember around the time it happened. I was sick, and it's a fucked up situation. In the federal prison, you can have emails, and there was a few, like, well, I wouldn't say famous, but I mean the guy from Blow, the movie Blow with the cocaine. He was there. There was some guy from nobody big, but some pitcher from the fucking Yankees or some dude from the Yankees was there. A couple of people, and I emailed my brother and told him. And I was in some fucking program, some drug program. Somehow my lawyer pulled it off, even though I was selling steroids. I got a drug program. That was going to knock off a fuck ton of time for me and halfway house time. So they're very strict. It's almost like a totally different fucking world considering the rest of the prison. Inside there, you're expected to snitch on each other, so it makes no fucking sense to me. It's like it's called RDAP. And, they'll read your emails. And just to be dicks, they said I violated like fucking prison security with saying who was in the fucking prison in my emails to my brother. And they fucking threw me in the shoe. So now I'm in the shoe and I'm in there with like one other dude for like fucking 3 months. And like one of the days I was fucking just like, I was horribly sick for a few days when I was in there. But one of them, when it was the worst, I remember just like, I was like kind of like fading in and out. And all of a sudden I just remember I just like knocked out. And I was like, in this, did you ever see Silent Hill?
right.
It was very much like that, where I had like woke up and I found myself like I felt like I was like laying on the side of like a long pillar that had just like this big kind of like pillar walls. And I was like, I was up high enough, but like I was just like laying there and it like literally seemed like it was like snowing, like it was in Silent Hill, but it wasn't snow. It was like something just coming through. And like, did you ever like when it snows out and it's like really quiet, it actually has a feeling to it?
Right. Oh, I
I
love
I felt I felt that, man. So I was like, yo, is this snow? I'm like, I'm like, but where the fuck am I? And like for some reason I was like, yo, this looks like Mars. But like, I don't know what made me think that. But like I remember like just like that was very real, and where I was just felt like I was like actually there. And like I just like was even like confused about like where the fuck am I?
right.
Yeah.
Well, that goes into a lot of the practices about how children are chosen in ancient societies when they need a new shaman or a new priest class. Is that oftentimes a kid that will have a near fatal illness when they're young will be chosen for shamanic purposes because they were closer to death in that moment. And that could actually go into a lot of your meditative experiences later on, is because you're in this liminal space. Like the way you described it, it seemed like a place between worlds,
And you know what was weird? I felt like the reason why I was like, I don't think this is snow, because it almost felt like it was a struggle to breathe, as if like something like this stuff was even a problem. Like it was real to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm wondering if that was, who knows, if it was just like a visual representation of my soul like fucking drifting off.
Well, the game
Maybe
Silent
breathing would be harder if you start leaving.
Well, that game Silent Hill is about a town in, I believe it's West Virginia, that has a mine fire of coal
Yeah.
still burning.
That's a
So,
wild game and movie. And nobody's
right.
checked it out. Smoke want to watch that movie. It's bugged out. Easy, but I think it's good.
But even in the game, like everything shifts back and forth from this hellish reality to this sort of, partially broken down reality. And it's
Yeah,
done
yeah. It's like you're stuck in limbo, and then it just gets creepy.
right. Right. And
Back
so,
and
yeah,
forth,
that,
back and forth.
that would make sense as this liminal dream where, you're stuck between worlds. And it makes sense, a lot of sense, if this illness that you were suffering from was bringing you closer to the brink of death, So you were looking at the space between life and death.
See, you know what Alan Stiles is saying, which is like really weird, like bugged out to me, is because like I was into the occult then, but like not heavily into it. I kind of got like really big into it after prison. And he says it represents initiation into the mystery schools. Where I was, it even like when I was, it almost kind of looked like a big pillared arch, and then like a flat thing that I was on, and then like just big pillars going down. And
Hmm.
like, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure that really isn't what was happening, but like, it was very after the fact. Once I got into occultism, I did think back at that and be like, it's very like kind of like the whole Masonic arch, really.
Right. And you had all those pillars all over the place.
Yeah, it was fucking weird. Yeah.
Those pillars are really significant because that's connecting the earth to the sky, and that's what those pillars have always represented. I wanted to talk about this one a little bit because I used to have dreams like this too, really insignificant stuff, but it was like visions of the future. And I would remember that I had that dream as I was going through whatever it was I was dreaming about, right? And that's, it's a kind of odd sensation, but you can change those. And I think what I did was I changed it while it was happening so that it didn't play out the way it did in my dreams. And now I don't have them anymore. So I wish I hadn't, it would have been a lot easier if I don't know, maybe it seems like it would have been a lot easier, but I don't know either way. But having these trivial dreams of the future, that's interesting to me because it's like, why not give me something I can use, Give me something I can use here, people. But yeah, it's
It's like a
these
vision
dreams,
of you tying your shoe like 10
right?
years from now. It's like, that doesn't help me much. Thanks.
Well, I mean, it's like the problem with the Greek prophecies, It's like the more you try and get away from your fate, the closer you get to it. And that's pretty depressing to think about. Centralia mine fire. That's what it was. It wasn't West Virginia. It was Centralia.
Yeah, bugged out movie. It's I think there's occult aspects to that movie too. Pretty cool
Oh
though.
yeah. Oh yeah. And if you consider things like dreams to be significant when it comes to the world of symbols, then all of your dreams become this occult significance, And I heard a podcast today. It was on the Higher Side Chats. This guy was talking about how the ancient snake symbolism represents that big old arm of the Milky Way that we see across our sky at night. Like that was considered to be the snake. And if you think about that, the whole Orphic egg makes sense because we're looking out from the inside of the egg and we see a giant snake wrapped around us, you know? So when you understand that as being an ancient symbol for the universe and how to connect with it, and what they were saying was you connected with it through Polaris, through that North Star, then you figure out why that swastika is always so important to these ancient civilizations as well, is because that's how they climbed the column, that's how they climbed the tree out to the greater universe. And it does seem like the way the snake has been demonized in the way that it has been since Christianity, what they're trying to do is keep you here. They're trying to say, don't connect to that wider galactic consciousness. That snake is evil. Well, at the same time, Jesus said, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so too will I be lifted up. So he's calling himself that snake, that branch. And in some ways that makes sense because it's very heavily related to Dionysian symbolism and all of these symbols of man as this connected form to the gods. So, Dionysus would be the intercessor between man and the gods. And then you had all these other intercessor deities that are very closely related to that. So I think if you dream about Dionysus, I'd like to hear about those dreams as well, because that's really interesting to me. From everything I've seen, everything I know, I think that there is going to be this return of the old gods, and I keep seeing it. Like the other day, I saw this huge flock of bald eagles just sitting on the side of the road, looking at the cars going by, and it's like, that's odd. There's no kill over there. They're not feasting on anything. It just, they're looking at the road. They're looking for something to return. So I think even the animals feel it. And I like to talk
I
about,
definitely think the animals know something's coming.
right?
Animals are acting a little bit more intelligent than they normally should be, in my opinion. Like, I even feel like they're like, I hate using the phrase like upgrading, but I do feel like their consciousness is expanding a little bit.
Right.
That's my opinion when it comes to animals.
I feel like,
or maybe we're just noticing it more. I don't know.
I feel like this would go back to the conversation about demons, because another way of expressing the idea of demons comes from the Greek form, which would be daimones. And that daimones concept is like a helper spirit or a tutelary spirit that would follow you around. Aristotle had one, Plato had one. All these people who were the inspiration for this philosophical god, they all had these tutelary spirits that they would listen to. I believe Plato's was the gadfly. So the gadfly would warn him of danger. A gadfly is just another word for a biting insect. So he would feel something before something bad would happen to him, and that daemon would serve him throughout his entire life. But there's also the idea of geniuses. So the genius is like the intellect of these species, and if these animals are feeling it, they have more of a collective soul than we do. We have much more individualized souls. If they're feeling it and they're looking for it, that would make sense, because the genius of these animals is more of a collective idea, and that's how shamanism and all the rest of this would interact.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I like that, actually. Yeah, I would like to say just real quick, because I'm going to drop this on the Occult Rejects. Anybody in the Occult Rejects has any paranormal or I guess dream stuff, email headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com. Send it over to Headless. You'll probably hear it on the show anyway. Or go listen to it on his.
Yeah. Hey, we're all playing together, I mean,
no, but I would like to have people send you some stuff, because I do find this interesting and fun. So
right. I think as things are quickening, it's very important that people stay connected. I mean, the biggest problem I think we see is, like, they started the internet saying, hey, you can connect with friends halfway across the globe. You can connect. And yet it's made us more separated than ever before. I mean, we spend all of our time in our houses looking at these screens, and we never have any real interactions.
it separates from you physically, and then like mentally you'll start separate. That's where all the decisiveness and separating yourself from certain people. It's just a constant tumbling of that.
Right. I mean, how many people in the chat have actually had somebody in their lives that just hates them for no reason? And then it just ends up snowballing and affecting everything. And it's like, there's so many self-fulfilling prophecies going on now between interpersonal relationships that just seem to just tear us apart. And we can't really get to the bottom of it because we can't even understand it ourselves. So, I feel like if we can connect on these deeper levels by sharing our dreams, sharing our occult experiences, sharing the paranormal, we're not going to be in that pit anymore. That pit, that Zagreus pit of, we're sort of being reduced. As in connecting with other people, I feel like we're enhancing ourselves, right? We're enhancing our understanding, we're enhancing our consciousness. But as we become more and more isolated, we find that, we're being diminished and treated more like animals. I think the dichotomy between the individual and the collective is never a real dichotomy. We've sort of been trained to think that there is this sort of difference between the collective and the individual, but I don't think there is. I think the way we understand individualism is from a collective consciousness level, and the way we understand collective consciousness comes from the individual level. So these things are very integrally linked, and yet on the same point, both of these concepts are being diminished in the information age. So we don't have that collective consciousness angle. We don't, use our families as sounding boards anymore. We hardly ever see our families. We're just working all the time and basically being cut off from any sort of real connection. So if we can provide a real connection for you, this is the place to do it. These are deep philosophical concepts and deep emotional concepts. And getting into that, I feel like, is a much more genuine, authentic way of interacting than what we normally get watching cat videos or.
Yeah. I mean, I do watch plenty of those too.
Oh yeah,
that's all I really share on Instagram stories is cat video.
I watched this one video. It was a Japanese reporter guy, right? And he wanted to find out why this dog was so fat, right? It was a street dog. And so this street dog was making the rounds throughout the town every single day. And so he followed it to this one lady's house where this dog is like invited in to take baths with the family, right? So he's in there getting all scrubbed up. He gets a bowl of food. They love this dog, right? And then he goes over to the meatpacking district where they love this dog. And so they're giving him food. And he's just making the rounds, making all these friends. All these other dogs love him. So he just comes around every single day getting fed like 40 times a day.
Yo, that is wow. This guy's got he's got a whole thing going on.
I love it. It's real hard-hitting journalism too, because this guy was clearly a reporter, and he's just following a dog around during his daily rounds as he gets all this food, gets super fat from all this love that he gets from everybody in the town. I love that.
That is some funny shit.
Let's see. Slick Dissident says Ingram 4 individual has shadow of envy. Infernally, envy is named Leviathan. Leviathan is intrinsic to democratic mob mentality. I couldn't agree more. There's this idea that we need to level everything, as if we understand where the wealth is coming from. The democratic urge to level everything is very, very toxic.
Yeah.
You could really see that.
Well, that's like you get pissed off and knock everybody else's sandcastles over at fucking the beach. Because you can't build yours, it keeps falling over, so you knock everybody else's over. That's it's an example for that. That's how childish it is.
Right. I think the cure for democracy is nobility. And that's very different from elitism. You have to have curiosity if you're a noble person. You have to try and understand how the world around you works so that you can make the best decisions for the people you love. And when you do that, that's what really raises all these ships up. It's not the material possessions that make you noble. It's the idea that you have certain principles you won't violate and certain principles that motivate you towards action. And that nobility is severely lacking in our society because, shit, man, you put somebody up on the stand and you have them swear in and they don't feel like there are any consequences for lying under oath. Why even swear them in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like whenever these politicians have people come in front of Congress, I'm like, what's the point of this?
Right.
Ted Cruz is bringing another one up there. You go nowhere with this anyway. Right. I think it's all like staged.
But it's all crumbling now. We see it over and over and over.
Oh, yeah. I hate to say it, but I do think there's just going to be issues popping up from previous medical whatever you want to call it. Previous medical advice.
Right.
I might be showing issues popping up very, very, very soon. And what I find interesting is the person who gave you the symptoms happens to be back to give you a fix for it now too. Fucking Trump.
Right. And as we're seeing all these institutions start to crumble, we have to remember that there is a religious fanaticism around the big V word.
Oh, yeah.
The big V word we can't even say. I had
to around science and politics now.
Right.
Both. It's like become a religion radicalized.
And if you think about it, the V word looks a little bit like a crucifix that you can inject into your arm.
Yo, and what the fuck is the odds of that? Damn.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's wild. That's why I caught that for a second. I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So,
Yo, you know what's another funny thing too? That this is what's crazy. This is just from my own experience and from other people I knew. When I knew people who all of a sudden got crazy radicalized with like politics and like other certain things, it's like, yo, you knew nothing about it though 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Like you actually don't know a fucking thing about politics. And now all of a sudden you're a fucking staunch Republican. Like,
right.
what? It's just weird how it's just like some of this stuff, and even it's like that's where you have to start wondering, in my opinion, what's going on here that you're getting people who are so far not even thinking about it to where now they're obsessing over it.
Right. Right. It's the pendulum swing going crazy. This
Yeah.
metronome is just swinging off the charts. Everybody's switching sides. And these political divides, I started out as an ANCAP. That's when I started doing my podcast as Anarchy Ball and all the rest of this stuff. And then I look back on it and it's like, there's no spirit there, right? Like anarcho-capitalism is just as materialistic
Yeah.
as communism.
Uh-huh.
And the real problem is it goes back to what William's asking right here. Nobility as in monarch or as in elected aristocracy. And it's like, it's neither of those. I think what it comes back to is this right here. What you have is a bloodline. And that bloodline is what you're supposed to be taking care of and boosting up so that they can have a consistent principled morality in addition to, the material things that each generation builds upon, right? That's what a noble person is somebody whose family has benefited from this. And, what we see in our society is that wealth rarely survives 3 generations. It's completely squandered by the 3rd generation because those people become spoiled. They no longer have the same rituals. They no longer have the same roots. And you just get this.
Don't have the passion of the oath.
Right. And so the way I describe it is that dominance leads to decadence. Decadence leads to degeneracy. Degeneracy leads to destruction. There's your 3 generations right there.
That's about right.
And instead of understanding and witnessing that, we end up having to go through all this stuff. So having a sense of nobility, there's a good example. A lot of people don't look into the Asatru stuff because it was kind of invented in the 1970s, but they have the 9-fold noble path, right? And those principles that they lay out in the 9-fold noble path of Odin is very much applicable to all people. And if you want to start cultivating a sense of nobility in yourself and passing that on to your offspring, there's no better time than now to start understanding that,
I agree, sir.
And we're seeing a lot of this Leviathan stuff. I mean, you've got Leviathan, you've got Typhon, you've got these ideas of this monster.
Apophis and Typhon.
Right. Right. And that monster really does represent a lot of that unconscious level thinking. It's automatic. It starts to influence your daily life. It's something that you can't beat on your own, like addictions and all the rest of these things. They become monsters in your own life. And I think a lot of that monster stuff is just not examined as the beast that it really is. I mean, we understand the beast and the false prophet and all the rest of these things, but we never really apply that to ourselves. I believe if you're going to take a really honest look at the Bible, you have to think about Genesis and Revelations happening at the same time, because that's the place we exist in. If you take that cosmology, we exist in the space between the beginning and the end all the time.
That's the whole story of the magician right there. If it's really, that's the beginning and the ending of the whole story. My opinion, what you're saying, that makes sense. Genesis would start up after the end of Revelations if the magician makes it back home.
Right. And so what Christianity is given is linear time, right? All Abrahamic religions have the concept of linear time. There is no reincarnation. There is no birth, death cycles. There's no cycles in the heavens. I mean, I'm sure you can get into esoteric Christianity and find all that stuff. Yeah. But for the most part, in mainstream Christianity, it's all just basically straightforward. There's a beginning and there will be an end, so you better get ready for it. And it doesn't really take into account the real cycles of history. And when you remove a person's understanding of the cycles of history, they become doomed to repeat those cycles of history, and nobody's really thinking about it. But if you start to understand and integrate those ideas of the cycles of history, you'll very, very easily start to identify the Leviathan in your own life that is sort of draining your power and sucking from you. And once you understand that, then you could start to move past it. You can start to have a better life outside of that cycle. But I think it's important to understand the cycles that occur in your life, and that's part of knowing yourself, you know. Ethan Hawke wrote a cool child's book about how to be a knight. If you guys have kids, it's great advice. Okay, check that out.
Oh, Apophis asteroid is happening now, Teresa saying?
Right. The Apophis asteroid, they're supposed to, well, I thought they already landed on it. I'm not sure.
Apophis and Typhon is mentioned in the hexagram ritual. Supposed to represent the beast.
Right. And so there is an interesting relationship between the OTO and Typhon. I don't really see the connection between the battle between Typhon and Zeus, though. That's what they're using, though. They're using the idea of Typhon versus Zeus, but they're kind of divorcing it from its original context. How would you describe the relationship between Typhonian OTO and the rest of the magical system?
You know what? I couldn't tell you anything about this Typhonian order.
Really?
Yeah, all I know is that is has nothing to do with the OTO, technically. It's just people from the OTO. Kenneth Grant started that on his own. There's no correlation or attachment. So that's why I couldn't tell you anything about it. I was never interested. I was never interested in learning, what he's into.
But like you were saying, though, there is still the Typhonian elements of the hexagram ritual.
Well, yeah, you do. You say Apophis and Typhon, yeah, you can call it, yeah, in the hexagram ritual, yes.
And it's that again.
Yeah, that one there is like thoughts on. I couldn't tell you anymore because it's been so long, but there were thoughts on like why that is implied with Apophis. Because you're going from like Egyptian to something else.
Right. Yeah. And I think you get that a lot at the Oracle at Delphi.
And then you're doing that also with hero words that you're saying. It's a real words in the same rituals. So.
It's a real interesting mishmash. It's one of the reasons why I always try to construct my own rituals instead of going by these things that have been constructed by orders I really don't understand too much about, because they have their own associations and I have my own associations. And why would I use somebody else's associations if mine are just as valid, you know? So, but in the case of the Oracle at Delphi, you have Apollo slaying the Python, right? And this Python was coming for his mother. And so he killed the Python, and the Python is what brings about the Oracle. So as you're sitting on top of this tripod in the Oracle chamber, it's supposed to be the spirit of the serpent that comes over you, and that's what's, the combination of the serpent and Apollo are what's speaking through you. And in the syncretism, Apollo is called the Elder Horus. Right. And so Horus is the one who slew Apophis. And so you've got that slaying of the snake on both ends. They also say Set slew Apophis and several other deities did. They had a lot of different cosmologies within the whole Egyptian milieu. And what they tried to do is encourage people to make more of it, because I think a lot of this was based around shamanic experiences that they had and wrote down as these origin stories, but I think it goes back to that branch of the Milky Way we see at night, because that snake is essentially trying to destroy the world. I mean, the gravity in the middle of it would be, they say that there's a black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. In essence, that is both the creator and the destroyer of worlds. So that idea of the monster, or this Apophis snake, is really, central to all of it.
I still
But
think
I think
sometimes. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no.
I
I was
still
going
think
to close it up.
sometimes the snakes are just. I know not everything's always going back to the eyeballs, but I do think that sometimes snakes can be used for that.
Right. Well, I think
Especially the snake eating its own tail, I think can be used for that. Because it'd be like it's screwing clothes, it's just eating its own tail. And like,
right.
but no,
Well,
I have wondered with Apophis, and then I forget the Typhon's actually a snake too. So I am wondering if somehow there is a correlation between both eyes and the hexagram ritual.
right. I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, you've got the as above, so below, and then you turn the hexagram on its side, and you've got the two M's. It's
Yeah,
sort of the idea of the reflections of mother and monster. You've got those two ideas right there in that hexagram, because creator and destroyer all in one thing.
yeah. And one thing I did want to mention before, besides I said it's in the hexagram ritual, and you mentioned Apophis. Even in that ritual, you do also mention Isis and Osiris. So I mean, it is interesting about why Typhon is thrown in there.
Right. Well,
Maybe people should look into that, try to figure out why. There might be something behind that.
absolutely. I think this was a great episode. We're going to keep it nice and short and sweet. And I think this is going to make good clips. We can clip this up and throw this out on Instagram and other places. We got to get more of these stories, people. So if you've got occult stories, if you've got esoteric stories, if you've got magical experiences and paranormal experiences, we're here for you. We want to
Yes,
talk about them. And if you
definitely.
like our analysis, we're here to do it. So thanks for joining us. This has been my co-host, Nick from the Occult Rejects. I've been your host, a Headless Giant, and thank you very much.